over 5,000 people alive in Dubai the day before you arrived. How many are alive today, I wonder?
Spec Ops: The Line is a game unlike any other I've ever played. While it may seem on the surface like a run-of-the-mill third-person war shooter, it's the farthest thing from that. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself here, because today we're going to dive deep into the entire story of Spec Ops: The Line from start to finish, covering the whole thing, going through the individual story beats as they happen in the game from the perspective of a first-time player. But first, we quickly have to address the history of this franchise, because yes, some may be surprised to hear that this is one of many Spec Ops titles, as it is a series of tactical shooters first created by Zombie Studios in 1998 with its first title, Spec Ops: Rangers Lead the Way, which was a pretty well received game despite not getting that popular. It had its fair share of fans, but it only saw limited success with its Windows-only release. Still, the franchise was popular enough to receive sequels given admittedly generic names like Stealth Patrol, Covert Assault, and Airborne Commando, but overall gameplay-wise, these titles have been compared to other games like SOCOM US Navy SEALs and Rainbow Six. However, the last game in the series was 2002's Airborne Commando, before it would end up being rebooted in 2012 with Jaeger's The Line, which would end up being published by 2K Games. But we've spent enough time on the general history. Let's get into the actual game itself. But even before it begins, you can already tell something is off. After launching the game, at first glance, you're met with a seemingly basic main menu, but even just looking at this now, you can tell something is just not right here. Nothing is what it seems. You'll notice a sniper, who the fanbase has dubbed Joe, sitting atop one of these derelict high-rises in Dubai. Beside him sits, planted firmly, an American flag. Initially at a glance, a sign that help is on the way. The good guys are here. But ominously, the tattered flag blows in the wind, hanging upside down, which according to the US flag code is a signal of significant distress, usually involving extreme danger to property and life. And faintly in the background, as Joe wipes his forehead from the sweltering heat in his sniper's nest overlooking the city, you can hear a distorted version of the American national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, performed by Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock in 1969. Another foreboding sign. Besides that, this menu is interesting in that it changes as you play through the game. So remember Joe the sniper, we'll get back to him as we progress, but for now, let's begin Spec Ops: The Line. Also, major spoilers for the entire game, of course. It's a one-in-a-lifetime experience playing this game, so if you don't want to be spoiled, I encourage you to pick up this game on Steam and play it for yourself blind. I promise you, you won't regret it. That out of the way, the game opens up in media res, a classic on-rails helicopter turret sequence, something you've seen 1,000 times before in Call of Duty and other first and third-person shooters, the bombastic opening action sequence, par for the course in these kinds of military shooters. Generic military dialogue, dramatic set piece where you shoot at unknown bad guys with a minigun. However, during this, we're suddenly hit by an abrupt sandstorm and our helicopter collides with an enemy chopper also caught in the storm. So far, pretty standard stuff. After this, we cut to black and we are met with text reading earlier, suggesting this opening bit was a flash forward. Before we get on the ground in Dubai, we are told through narration by our main character about what really happened. That being that Dubai was hit by huge sandstorms, basically wiping out the entire city and leaving many refugees unable to escape. That's where Colonel John Konrad came in, a commander of the 33rd Battalion of the US Army, who our protagonist describes as a war hero, serving in Afghanistan and taking his battalion to Dubai to save the people, against the wishes of the UAE government. Our main character even describes how during a mission in Kabul, the colonel single-handedly dragged us out of a gunfight and saved our life, half a mile even to an evac chopper. However, despite how much our main character admires Konrad, it seems something went wrong with this rescue operation, because when things got dire, Konrad was ordered to abandon the city, an order which he and his men defied. From here, the storms in the area only got worse, and for 6 months, they didn't hear anything back from the colonel until 2 weeks ago, when they received a final distress transmission from Konrad.
This is Colonel John Konrad, United States Army. Evacuation of Dubai ended in complete failure. Death toll, too many.
It's here that we're finally introduced to our protagonist, Captain Martin Walker, a no-nonsense military man, almost looks like Ethan Hawke, and with him are his other squad mates, First Lieutenant Alfonso Adams, the heavy arms specialist who uses a shotgun and LMG in most engagements, and is also an experienced helicopter pilot, and for the most part follows the orders given to him by Captain Walker. And then there's Staff Sergeant John Lugo. He frequently butts heads with Adams and is the lowest ranking member of the squad, but also the designated sniper and medic of the team. He's also a translator that knows many of the local spoken languages, and he's also quite sarcastic and cracks a lot of jokes, but also disagrees more with Walker than Adams. They are all part of an elite, or you could say Spec Ops unit called Delta Force. Your orders and mission here are simple. Locate any survivors in the city and radio for backup. Essentially, this is just a recon mission before they send in the cavalry of troops to aid in the evacuation of the city. As Delta Team approaches the outskirts, Lugo thinks he hears someone, but they dismiss it and continue on, and for the most part, they're taking it all pretty lightly. After all, this sandstorm disaster happened months ago, and they aren't expecting to run into a bunch of survivors right outside the city. Lugo and the others joke around for a bit until Adams points out that it feels like they are actually being watched. They continue on, searching for the distress beacon, the origin of the last transmission from Konrad. Lugo points out that strangely the beacon isn't military and was made out of spare parts. On the back of a truck near the beacon can be found a confession letter from Konrad. There are many more of these intel pieces littered throughout the game, and I'm sure you're familiar with how these work. They're in like every Call of Duty game ever. But these here actually give quite a bit of additional context to the story and lore, so we'll go through these as we come across them. Essentially, it's a confession by Konrad of him failing his men from the 33rd Battalion, forcing them to stay in Dubai. Ominously, he says that if they are found alive, then they are innocent because it was under his orders that they even remained in the city at all. After this, Adams finds the fresh corpse of an American soldier from the 33rd lying dead inside a Humvee, but before they can figure out what happened to the man, they are surrounded by armed refugees from the storm. Walker tells them they are searching for survivors, but one of the armed men says,
"Why? So you can kill us too?"
Lugo tries to speak with the men in Farsi, but the leader of the survivors gives the order and they attack the squad, forcing Walker and the others into a gunfight, which Walker is able to quickly end thanks to advice from Adams, shooting at a bus filled with trapped sand above the refugees, which takes them out. So the squad continues on, fighting through more groups of the militia. Adams suggests that they radio back to command and tell them they found survivors, but they're in really no position to do that now, so they press on. It's here you're introduced to the squad members' different abilities. Basically, you can give commands to Lugo and Adams while fighting. Lugo is a marksman and can be given the order to kill targets at range, while Adams can use a stun ability on large groups. Both are actually pretty useful on harder difficulties, but the stun is definitely better in my opinion, because sometimes Lugo can't always kill a target that's behind cover. So I guess now would be a good time as any to talk about the gameplay, but let's be real here. Nobody's playing Spec Ops The Line for the gameplay, but for what it is, it's a pretty fun shooting gallery with a couple gimmicks thrown in like the sandstorms and environmental traps. But in all honesty, it's pretty sluggish and clunky control-wise, but not a big deal. Totally passable gunplay and mechanics. As long as it fulfills its purpose as a vehicle for the story, then it's fine, right? It does absolutely facilitate that. Although, just gotta say, the bullet time mechanic is a little bit strange and out of place, and seemingly happens at random times and for inconsistent durations. The scoped weapons are pretty jank too, cause when you zoom in, your character is like flicking all over the place. And the sprinting slash cover system is pretty clunky, considering at least on PC it's the same button for whatever reason. Same situation for vaulting and melee too. Like, I don't really understand why each of these controls couldn't have just been separate buttons, but last thing I'm gonna say is this game in the early chapters is pretty easy, but as the game goes on, it can get pretty hard on the harder difficulties. Enemies are fairly tanky and will just spray you down in a second if you leave cover or are exposed in any way. But I actually do recommend, if you are going to play this game and haven't yet, that you play it on a harder difficulty. Not just for the additional challenge, but because you might miss out on some of the unique loading screens. But don't worry, we'll be covering the most important and interesting ones in this video. But gameplay tangent aside, let's get back to the story. So after we deal with the rest of the gunmen, Walker points out how he thought they were here to rescue people, before an explosion breaks out and Lugo receives a distress call from a member of the 33rd. We also learn during this call that this group of armed survivors are called the Insurgents, and on our way to rescue the American soldiers, Walker, Adams, and Lugo again have to fight through a group of these insurgents. On the way to the squad, the soldier on the radio references themselves as Alpha Patrol and says there are 4 of them and they're holding off the insurgents but are running low on ammo. The team is currently pinned down in the fuselage of a downed aircraft in the sand. Walker and his team approach from behind enemy lines and equip silencers to quietly and covertly deal with the enemies. However, they're eventually spotted by men on the wing and have to just fight it out the old-fashioned way. Eventually they shoot their way into the plane, and inside you can uncover another piece of intel, a black box, also called a flight recorder, which captured the final moments aboard this destroyed airliner. It's clear from the message that only wealthy people could afford to book a flight on this plane, with one of the pilots saying they even paid 4 times the normal price just to get out of the city. But instead of following regulations and safety measures, the pilots chose to fly even in dangerous conditions. Likely thanks to the greed of the airline company, who was making a fortune from these dangerous flights out of Dubai, so it's not all that surprising that it ended in disaster. This little piece of world building doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the story as far as I'm aware, but it definitely shows the devastation of Dubai due to these storms. Continuing through the plane, fighting through more waves of insurgents, Delta finally makes it to Alpha Patrol, but they're all dead except for one guy who is bleeding out, who in his last words tells the captain about another surviving member of his squad, McPherson, who was kidnapped and taken away to a place called the Nest. Adams locates some tracks heading north and they follow. On the way, Adams points out how they aren't exactly following their mission. Remember, all they were told was to locate survivors and radio for backup. But being the typical heroic American savior protagonist, Walker says the mission turned from recon to rescue as soon as they found US soldiers dead, and so they trudge on. They eventually find the end of the tracks and seemingly locate the Nest. Now they just have to break their way in. But it's also here that you might notice if you're playing the game, Walker is kind of obsessed with Konrad, bringing him up quite a few times by this point, hoping he's still alive so he can rescue him and return the favor. Makes sense, he idolized the man who rescued him in Afghanistan. Before they enter the Nest, however, which turns out to be an abandoned news station, you can come across another piece of intel. The first tape from a guy called the Radio Man, this one called Welcome to Dubai. We learn quite a bit about this man here. Notably, he is likely an investigative journalist, as he references the title of the piece he is working on, The Gathering Storm, an exclusive eyewitness account of the fall of Dubai. But clearly he doesn't seem very fazed by what's happening, even stating that he's bored waiting for a sandstorm. But another crucial detail is that the colonel, that being Konrad, actually allowed this guy, the radio man, to tag along with the 33rd. Moving on though, once you drop down the ledge, your team finds guards which you can silently take out either with your suppressed M4 or by commanding Lugo. However, stealth is broken not long after and you are greeted with more enemies and a grenade tutorial, showing you how to throw nades like in every other shooter ever. But a notable part about this segment is that music can be heard playing. I mean, this is normal for these kinds of games, right? Play classic rock music during an epic set piece, been there, done that, but not exactly, because the characters in the game actually hear the music too. It's playing in the real world, it's coming out of the speakers in the actual station, and when the music is played in this context, suddenly it feels a lot more uncanny and creepy as you're mowing down guys with your assault rifle. And if you guys were wondering, the song is Hush by Deep Purple, which is a banger. I remember this from back in the Guitar Hero 2 days. But regardless, they push their way past the insurgents and into the heart of the Nest. As you go down the stairs, you can notice some graffiti on the walls, saying things like bad news, water please, God show mercy, but most common are references to liars, too many lies, and even mentor, a French word that translates to liar as well. But who? Who was lying? The news station? We find our answer on a small tape recorder buried in the sand of the newsroom. On the tape, we hear a producer talking to a news anchor, convincing her to read off a script from a teleprompter, which is lying to the people of Dubai, saying that an evacuation force is on the way and that they should remain in the city, essentially covering up how large scale this disaster has become or how bad it will truly get. This is most likely what the writings on the wall were referring to. Not exactly sure if this was before or after the 33rd arrived in Dubai, but either way at this point it seems fair to say that not all is what it seems in this city. But as we proceed through the nest, we hear a voice come over the intercom, the same man that left a message outside the news station, the radio man as he's called. He speaks to the insurgents and says thanks to an assault on the 33rd, likely the Alpha Patrol that Delta has been trying to rescue, they have called an end to a ceasefire, suggesting at least at some point the US Army and the local militias were not directly engaged in armed combat for at least some time before Walker and his team showed up, but that is now over. The radio man is strangely enthusiastic about this message too, even laughing and joking as he discusses the conflict between the locals and the American soldiers over the radio. Adams again recommends that they call into command as things are only getting more complicated here, but Walker disregards his advice again, saying they need to push forward and rescue McPherson, the soldier from Alpha Patrol who can lead them to Colonel Konrad. Once they know he and his men are safe, then they'll radio in for evac. Another big fight breaks out in the sands outside of some buildings, but eventually after fighting through a few waves of insurgents, a sudden sandstorm hits, and not only is visibility diminished, but the building in front of the squad starts to break down. And suddenly the ground that Walker is standing on caves in, leaving a giant chasm underneath him. Although luckily he is able to grab onto a piece of the building with one hand and use the other to wield his gun, shooting down insurgents as he holds on for his life. A pretty rousing and action-packed set piece, all things considered. Kinda like a playable movie, what you'd expect from a game like this. But eventually Walker slips, losing his grip and falling into the hole, only to wake up and find himself, along with Lugo and Adams, inside of a sunken hotel. They get up and make their way to a locked door before they are found and surrounded by members of the militia. They fight them off by shooting at and breaking the glass on the roof that they're standing on and manage to push them back. However, the insurgents, instead of fighting Delta directly, decide to instead just throw a bunch of C4 through the roof, and Walker and the others barely manage to get through the door before the explosives are detonated. Making their way through the hotel, Adams again questions what they're even doing on this mission. Why are they shooting at the people they're trying to save? Walker and Lugo know they didn't have much of a choice given that they shot at them first, but before they can even argue about it, they hear something and duck into cover, as two men enter the hotel from the floor above. It turns out one of the men is actually an American called Agent Castavin, and the other one is one of the insurgents. Castavin warns them against using C4 in buildings like these because they could end up bringing the whole thing down, due to them already being structurally damaged by the storm. He then asks where the soldier from the plane is, to which the insurgent tells him he's being guarded downstairs, but tells the American that he won't talk, but Castavin thinks he'll talk to him. However, he gets alerted to Delta's presence and we have to fight our way downstairs to save the soldier. Also on our way, we can find looter bullets, a piece of intel that comes from Walker's observation and narration, which is interesting. He describes how all the jewelry and flatware in the city is being melted down and turned into bullets. Definitely some striking imagery here, seeing as material things like gold and silver have no value in this almost post-apocalyptic wasteland that is Dubai. Bullets are now worth more than jewelry, and in one of the richest, most extravagant, and fast-growing cities in the world, no less. But we don't have time to look at silver bullets. We've got an American soldier to save, and another strange man, Castavin, who's trying to kill us, and we have no idea why. We continue pushing through the hotel as another sandstorm hits. With the window broken and sand pushing through, we have no choice but to go outside in the middle of the storm and fight through the insurgents as we blindly try to find a haven through the other side of the hotel. They again follow the tracks in the sand, leading to an elevator which they rappelled down, taking them into the financial center, which it appears has been a makeshift refugee camp which is now seemingly abandoned. Walking through here, we can find some incredibly disturbing children's drawings on the wall, illuminating some of what happened in Dubai through the perspective of the kids here. In one, we can see what appears to be a storm hitting and destroying two helicopters. Another shows a destroyed Dubai with buildings burning in the background and dead armed men laying on the ground, with another man, likely an insurgent, holding his AK-47, with smoke still coming from its barrel. The man is labeled Daddy. We see a few more that are a little harder to decipher or make out what's really happening. These could just honestly be just innocent regular kid drawings, but these are horrific acts of war. A daughter watches as her mother and father are gunned down by a soldier with a helmet. Could this be an American? Surely not, right? In another, we see a mother being carried away by two soldiers dressed in black wearing green helmets. A daughter cries as her mother is taken from her. Possibly her father or someone else she knew hangs from a noose in the background, while another person hangs from a nearby tree and another lies dead in the dirt. In another picture, two helicopters bomb and terrorize the people of Dubai, killing and destroying those on the street below. Adjacent to these pictures, we can find the actual camp. A few tents are set up, a fire, some cots, as well as kids' toys, stuffed animals, and even a makeshift crib mobile made out of scraps. Also nearby, a child's doll can be found. As Walker points out, the doll is not from before the storm hit Dubai. It was made after. It even has diamond earrings for eyes and silk for a dress, showing the true decadence of what was one of the most thriving cities in the world. But more than that, Walker realizes that there are survivors, children, people with families out there still, and these could be the very same people that they're shooting at, but they were given no choice, at least that's what he tells himself, and chooses not to show the doll to Adams or Lugo. As they progress, Lugo spots a light down a flight of stairs and goes to investigate. Meanwhile, as Walker, we catch a glimpse of some ominous graffiti art of a floating figure cloaked in the American flag, wielding an AK in one hand and a skull staff in the other, wearing a crown on their head and possibly a skull mask. Further down the camp, we can find more tents and hundreds of candles lit on the ground. They continue on and stumble across quite a disturbing sight. US soldiers of the 33rd lay on the floor against the wall, having been brutally executed, and an eerie ambient track plays in the background. On the wall behind the men is some more creepy graffiti of a man, a woman, and a child, all with their eyes blacked out. In the next room over though, we find our kidnapped soldier as well as the other American, Castovan, who is torturing and questioning McPherson. He asks how many soldiers are stationed at the water depot, but McPherson doesn't tell him anything and says that Dubai would be at peace if he hadn't stirred up the locals. It is here that it is revealed that Agent Castovan is in fact a CIA agent, and he was the one working with the group of insurgents and was responsible for the execution of those American soldiers in the other room that we found. And realizing he isn't going to get anything out of McPherson, decides to finish him off, pulling out his pistol. But Castovan is caught off guard by Delta Team, which the soldier uses to his advantage, taking the gun and shooting Castovan in the head, leading to a standoff with Delta.
Lower your weapon.
I look stupid to you?
No. That's why you're gonna point that pistol somewhere else.
Lower your weapon. I'll lower mine.
Not gonna happen. You got a name?
McPherson, First Lieutenant. You?
Walker, Captain. We found your friend at the plane. He told us where to find you.
Really? Where's he at?
He didn't make it.
Why am I not surprised?
So what? You think we killed him?
I didn't say that.
You're not saying much of anything, Lieutenant.
Article 4, Captain. You gotta speak to my commander.
Well, where's he at?
By now, I'd imagine he's just downstairs.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Why don't you wait here? I'll go get him.
Eventually McPherson lowers his gun, but is suspicious of Walker and the others, wondering where the rest of his squad is. But Walker lets him rappel down lower into the center. Lugo asks why he let him go, and he tells him he's not about to shoot a US soldier. Plus they can follow him, and hopefully he'll lead them to the 33rd and Konrad. So you and your team follow after him, only to enter what looks to be a CIA safe house, complete with plans of how to assist the locals in fighting the 33rd Battalion. Castovan's diary also can be found here. It tells us that the soldiers from the 33rd have instituted martial law in the city and are trying to maintain order, having to deal with stealing and rioting in the streets. But as we're looking around and trying to put the pieces together, we can hear McPherson talking to another soldier, saying,
Look, I don't know their names, but they're CIA. Who else could they be? You know our orders. There they are! Take them out!
Shortly after this, Walker and the others are spotted and the American soldiers proceed to open fire on them, and reluctantly, in order to survive, Delta Team has to return fire, killing McPherson and the other soldiers. This is one of the major turning points in the game. No longer are we just shooting at insurgents, now we're shooting at American soldiers. And as we push further in, they encounter the 33rd chasing down civilians and firing into the air, before they spot Walker and the others and open fire on them once again, to which Walker tells Lugo and Adams that they must fight back as they have no other choice. As you shoot your way through this market, Adams and Lugo both try to reason with the 33rd soldiers, telling them this is friendly fire and that they are not CIA, but rather Delta Force operators, but it's no use, and the soldiers continue to return fire, leaving us no choice but to deal with the rogue soldiers. A sign outside reads "No firearms in the camp," as we see 2 dead civilians next to it and continue past, only to hear screaming and wailing from both men and women. Hundreds of missing persons posters line the walls as they follow the screams. Lugo and Adams don't know what to do at this point, seeing their mission has completely gone off the rails, as it seems not only are the refugees of the disaster trying to kill them, but the 33rd itself has gone rogue and is rounding up civilians and attacking Delta Force without remorse or caution. Walker's only plan is to find Konrad, as he believes the colonel isn't part of this rogue band of army troops. Regardless, they move forward, stumbling onto a huge group of the 33rd below them, capturing and rounding up civilians to kill them all. Obviously, Walker and his team won't allow this and proceed to the lower floors to stop them. And as they do, the radio man starts talking again over the intercom. He talks presumably to the citizens of Dubai that are being taken by the 33rd, asking why they chose to attack them as they had a truce, a ceasefire which was referenced earlier. But the insurgents broke that truce. It looks here the 33rd is looking for revenge, but the good guys come in for the rescue, storming down and attacking the soldiers. We're met with fire from a grenade launcher as well as standard riflemen, while the radio man again plays music over the intercom. There's a lot of soldiers, but we fight tooth and nail until we're pinned down by a turret. Walker knows their only chance is to flank behind and take out the gunner, so he makes a break for it, and in his panic and the heat of the moment, opens fire on the first person he sees cross his sightline. However, this wasn't a soldier, but an innocent civilian. You look on in horror, knowing you, as Walker, scared and desperate, accidentally shot this poor woman. But you have to continue on. Nothing can be done for her now, and you have to save your comrades, and the civilians that are outside being rounded up by the 33rd. So you move on, flank the gunners, and capture the turret. What follows is your classic mounted gun sequence. Not too much to say about this. Walker just holds off the incoming horde of the 33rd before breaking the huge window behind them, letting in a mountain of sand, taking down any left that stood in their way. Now, having saved the civilians, Walker and his team go outside, only to be chastised by the locals, who just want them gone, and so they leave them, continuing their trek through the desert. On their way though, Walker comes up with a theory on what's going on, that the 33rd went to war with itself and split into 2 main factions, and whichever side won, they decided to stay and take over the city, although they don't know anything for certain yet. All that Walker knows is that Konrad would never be a part of what this group of the 33rd were just doing. They also wonder about what's going on with the CIA, why they are involved, and what they're trying to hide. And do they know anything about Konrad? Walker seems to think so, and believes finding one of their agents is their best bet. Conveniently, as this is happening, Lugo picks up a radio transmission from an Agent Daniels of the CIA, who is being questioned and tortured, presumably by the 33rd. Lugo is able to pinpoint the location of the broadcast, however, and they follow it, although Lugo suggests they're likely broadcasting it as a warning or a trap for other CIA agents, suggesting there are probably more in the city. Either way though, they continue descending further and further into Dubai, before we come across 2 soldiers just chatting and hanging around, and honestly the longer you sit and watch these guys banter, the harder it is to kill them. Not only are these American soldiers we're killing now at this point, but they also humanize them so well in small moments like this, which there are plenty of throughout the game.
Bradley, you got any gum?
Here you go. Last piece.
I don't want to take your last piece, dude.
Take it. Stole it off of Benson anyway.
Ah, well, fuck that guy.
No kidding.
You know, with all the shit going on, I forget how beautiful this place can be.
I feel you.
You know, sometimes at night I'll just come out here and sit. Just listen to the wind.
Yeah. Reminds me of how the wind used to howl through the trees where I grew up. Kind of peaceful, actually.
Hard to believe there's any peace in a place like this, huh?
You gotta look for peace no matter where you are, man. Helps remind you what you're fighting for.
Yeah, true that. Anyway, thanks for the gum. I'm gonna go check upstairs.
Anytime.
Not just in segments like these, but in the gunfights as well, where you can hear their desperation as they call for backup and call out where the enemies are or when they're reloading. It just all feels too real.
Where's that goddamn reinforcement?
Heads up! Shotgun! Coming for us!
But we gotta do what's necessary, so we get rid of these two. Push downstairs, where I hit this crazy quad feed with the ump on 4 of my fellow Americans. All jokes aside, we again have to kill plenty of soldiers before we can progress. Even had this poor guy bleeding out, had to execute him, put him out of his misery. Taking a closer look, you can find another piece of intel. A dossier on a CIA op squad codenamed Grey Fox, probably as a reference to Metal Gear Solid. But looking at the actual intel itself, it reveals what we already know, that the CIA is responsible for the attacks on the 33rd outposts using the local militias, which the 33rd refer to as the insurgents. They obtained this information through the interrogation of the CIA agent Daniels, who we are currently looking for. They also managed to extract a location of the CIA's stronghold, possibly where McPherson and the 33rd attacked us, but the dossier also notes that they could use Daniels as bait to lure other CIA members out into the open, again referencing that this could all be a trap. But without many other options, we just have to continue. We fight through snipers on the rooftops before even more infantry are dropped off by a helo. Some are even equipped with RPGs, but they're dealt with easily enough. Pushing forward into the nearby building, we can hear Daniels still being interrogated by one of the soldiers, and the squad realizes that Daniels likely can't hold on for much longer.
How many men did you bring here, Agent Daniels?
No, I'm done answering questions. You have to let me speak to Konrad.
Oh, really?
How long you think Daniels can hold out?
Not much longer.
But they're suddenly attacked by the chopper, which destroys the roof they're standing on. Luckily though, Walker is able to hold on with one hand and use an M249 saw one-handed to gun down enemy soldiers. It can be whatever gun you're holding here, but the fact that I was using this LMG makes this scene even more wild and bombastic than it already is. We battle through more of the 33rd, even shooting through a scale replica of the city in the process. But for now, our objective is to just keep going down, which we do. As they continue their descent, Walker comments how he thinks he remembers the man on the radio from his time in Kabul, recognizing his voice as a reporter who traveled with the 33rd. And in one of the rooms you can find another piece of intel, the confession of Daniel's interrogator, who describes how he himself was tortured, sandboarded, cut with knives, and even burned, which was the most painful part. He uses this knowledge to then in turn torture the insurgents and later Agent Daniels. But as they're walking through the building, eventually they come across what they think is the exit, but as Walker kicks in the door, sand quickly floods in, knocking him down into an impossibly long and dangerous fall, even slamming his back into concrete and sliding down the side of the building, something you'd see in Mission Impossible or COD, where it should be seemingly impossible for the character to survive, but he manages to grab onto some sort of pole, which slams him back into a window of the building, but before he falls, he quickly wraps a rope around it and he's able to catch his fall, but it still ends up knocking out the captain, only to wake up to the very same pole about to impale him if he didn't duck out of the way in the last second. But he's not out of the woods yet, as Walker is unable to reach Adams or Lugo, while the 33rd still pursues him, and only armed with a pistol has to deal with the patrol, and hold them off until Adams and Lugo come to the rescue, which they do just in the nick of time. After loading up on some weapons, the 33rd attacks once again, as Lugo also again locates the signal. I threw a sticky nade at this guy, and instinctively, like a Halo grunt or something, he ran into my team and blew them up, so there's that. Not to worry though, Mouse 3 heals all wounds as they say, and we press on, dropping down into a hole filled with the corpses of civilians. Blood and guts and bugs everywhere. This is accompanied by the screams of Daniels being tortured as we approach, and is also flanked by an equally menacing score. And as we proceed, we get additional context as to what is really happening to the 33rd. It turns out Walker's theory was right, as we can find multiple soldiers from the 33rd executed with bags over their heads, with American flags hanging in the background. It seems they were killed by their own guys, but why? There's also another piece of intel that can be found next to them. Another message from the radio man, where surprisingly he is questioning politicians about the evacuation cover-up in Dubai. It seems at least back then he genuinely cared about exposing the truth and helping the people of Dubai. Maybe things have changed since way back then. Still searching for answers, we continue past all the corpses and up the stairs, where we find another body hanging from his feet above a staircase of the financial center. Walker and the others approach cautiously as they notice the same torture sounds they heard earlier coming out of the corpse's mouth, only to see this man, Daniels, had been dead for a long time, and in his mouth is merely a speaker playing back an interrogation that already took place, which makes a lot of sense given the clues found in the dossier file, which already had gathered intel from Daniels about the location of the other agents as well as their safe house, so no point in keeping him around. The dossier also mentioned using him as a trap, which of course turned out to also be the case as Delta is surrounded by the 33rd. The radio man finally communicates directly with our team and Walker, saying that this trap wasn't actually meant for them, but for a different CIA agent named Gould.
This little trap was meant for a fox named Gould. But you ain't Gould. In fact, I don't know who you are. No one does. And that's dangerous.
Dangerous to who?
Everyone.
I mean, come on. You didn't actually think we'd just let you walk in here, did you?
Yeah, we did. We're looking for survivors.
We also get a small look at part of the guy's face during this. Also, the team encounters this Agent Gould, who the radio man referenced, who briefly saves them from a few 33rd soldiers before telling them to get out of there. So, as we always do, we fight our way out, as Gould explains how to escape, and left with no other options, we are forced to trust him for the time being. Anyway, after fighting your way into a museum as directed by Gould, you're confronted by a chopper and a minigun and have to make a break for it, as the radio man taunts you. Still, the good guys are able to get away safe and sound, for the most part at least. Adams has an injured leg, but he's alright. They take the time to regroup and review their options. Again, Adams says they should escape the city and call for evac, a rational thing to do at this point. It was their initial mission after all. However, Walker disputes this, saying they're 8 miles from the Stormwall and that the enemy helos would cut them down if they tried. So Walker thinks they should reconnect with Gould given he saved their lives, and might know what's going on in Dubai, and more importantly with the 33rd. Interestingly though, this is also, I believe, the first time we get a reference to the Damned 33rd, which is one of the 2 main factions within the battalion, which Lugo talks about in this scene. Not exactly sure where he heard that, but now they know about it. Possibly from the chatter of the American soldiers. Honestly, I'm not too sure though, but we'll talk about that more a bit later. For now, let's just continue on with the main story. Delta goes into an aquarium before being called by Agent Gould, who says they were sent to Dubai to find survivors, only to find that the city was tearing itself apart. Gould also points out that he's heard rumors that Konrad is still alive and in hiding somewhere. So in order to escape, we have to break some glass, releasing sand, trapping us in the aquarium, which takes us back outside. Not too far away, Gould and his insurgents are pinned down by fire from the 33rd, so Walker and his team head over to help out. We can find butchered civilians lying in the sand, as well as more strange graffiti. Equally disturbing, we can find on the highway, hanging from streetlights, more American soldiers, possibly killed and displayed as a warning by their own allies. Signs read, "City Gate ahead" and "Free water," but there are also more members of the 33rd looting for scraps on the street. It's also at this point that you might start to see some more disturbing loading screens, at least compared to your typical shooter. Either way, we follow the signs pointing to the city gate, but on a stop sign covered in police tape, there is another message left by the radio man, labeled "After the Storm." This is an important one, as we can see what the 33rd, and more specifically Konrad, did after the storms got worse. First of all, they control the water supply in Dubai, which basically means they control the city, but also we hear how civilians tried to raid one of the 33rd outposts, which Konrad returned with violence, having them all rounded up and shot as an example. Even the sadistic and sarcastic radio man couldn't watch this go down. Still, we're starting to piece together more about Konrad and the 33rd as we progress. But dropping down another hole, we see the direct impact of this civil war. How Gould may have gotten all these insurgents killed fighting against a trained military force, one they were very unlikely to overcome. But Lugo points out that maybe that sacrifice is worth it, although the men bleeding out and gasping for breath in this filth might think otherwise. But pushing beyond this trench, things get even worse, as the 33rd uses Willie Pete, also known as White Phosphorous, on the local insurgents right in front of Walker and Delta Force. A deadly and inhumane chemical weapon that completely destroys its targets, burning their skin down to the bone. It's a horrific instrument of death that we see firsthand, but we have no time to survive survey the damage, and we are immediately thrust back into combat against the 33rd and even the 1st heavy unit, essentially a juggernaut, which, side note, are brutal to take down on the harder difficulties. After this though, Lugo points out how the white phosphorus attack was unnecessary as the rebels were already beaten, to which Walker replies,
"It's a message to the survivors."
What survivors?
a grim fate awaits them if they attempt to fight back against the 33rd. Not far from here, we can find another of the Radio Man's tapes, this one labeled Soldier Interview, where he talks to an American soldier named Pete Gobby. He asks the young man why he stayed behind in Dubai, despite the US government and basically everyone else in the world giving up on this place. We learn he joined the 33rd and Konrad during tours in Afghanistan, but also that he, along with a lot of the other men, are fiercely loyal to Konrad, even in the face of being labeled deserters in the armed forces. He wholeheartedly believes in Konrad's mission of helping those in Dubai, even if everyone else has given up on them. Maybe his judgments have been misplaced. It's even more sad when you hear this man has a wife and a young daughter who he misses desperately and wishes he could see, but chooses to stay and do what he thinks is right. This is the person we're fighting against. In fact, we may have already killed this young man. Remember, we're fighting against our own, American soldiers. Maybe things with Konrad and the 33rd aren't as cut and dry as they may seem. Continuing past this, we finally make it to Agent Gould, who has been captured by the Interrogator and members of the 33rd, who have also rounded up civilians and begin executing them as Gould refuses to give up information on the other agents, especially one called Riggs. This is where we come across the first major decision of the game. Well, the second, actually. You see, I neglected to mention the first one because I didn't want to spoil the surprise of American soldiers being enemy combatants, so I neglected to point out that you can in fact kill McPherson after he kills Castovan. However, doing so doesn't really make any sense at this point in the story, and you are also chastised by both Lugo and Adams for good reason, as they have no reason to suspect the 33rd of doing anything evil at this point.
You got a name?
McPherson.
You shot him? Yeah, I did. Adams, check the body.
Either way, this decision is more notable, I think, because you have to choose between Lugo's choice of taking out the Interrogator and his men and freeing Gould, which he believes will help them find Konrad, or with helping Adams, who believes that if they open fire now, the civilians will be executed and would rather try to save them rather than Gould, pointing out that it was their mission after all. On this playthrough, I sided with Adams. If you want to do so, you wait for Gould to give up vital intel to the 33rd. He tells them Riggs is planning an attack at the Aquatic Coliseum, but seeing as they can't get anything else out of him, they finish the job. Adams and Walker sneak up on the soldiers though and stealthily kill a few. Well, you're supposed to anyway, but for whatever reason this guy face-tanked an M4 bullet to the face, which made me go loud on the first attempt. Thankfully though, you can just reload checkpoint, which I did. This time I made sure to spray a few bullets into this guy's face just to make sure he just wouldn't eat it, and making our way to the civilians, we come across a pretty haunting scene. Similar to that episode of Breaking Bad, they have to decide who pulls the trigger and kills the civilians. Neither of them want to do it, and they debate how they're going to choose, talking about drawing straws and flipping coins, which is what they ultimately decide on. But before they can reveal who is going to be given the task, we put them both down and rescue the hostages. Going back over to Gould, he's unfortunately dead, but on his person, he does have an op plan, leading to the gate. But Adams and Lugo bicker over Gould's death, with Lugo saying it's Adams and Walker's fault for not letting him take the shot, but actually you can't save Gould in any scenario. The other choice involves you opening fire on the 33rd and killing the Interrogator. However, like Adams said, the civilians are killed in the process, and Gould himself dies anyway. So with this choice, it's better to just save the civilians, because either way, Gould is killed. There's also another sort of hidden third choice, and that is to simply do nothing. Just wait, because eventually the Interrogator will just kill Gould and eventually spot you and initiate combat. Basically though, it's the same path as Lugo's. In any case, you make your way towards the gate using the intel found on Gould's body, but on the way, Adams and Lugo keep fighting, and Adams actually punches Lugo in the face before Walker manages to disarm the situation and keep them focused on their current objective, which at this point is pretty hazy at best. But all they can do now is trudge forward toward the gate. However, because we can never catch a break, the radio man is back announcing the death of Gould and paints targets on the backs of not just Captain Walker and Delta Force, but also Gould's partner, Agent Riggs, who we have yet to meet. But soon enough, we arrive at the gate. Walker has Adams deal with the lookout, while Lugo notices they are up against an entire army, and really have no chance in a head-on fight. In fact, you can try it yourself, but it will always end in failure. There's simply too many of them, and Delta is always overwhelmed. However, there is another option, the only choice in Walker's eyes. Well, I'll just show you the scene itself.
Alright, Lugo, who are we up against?
An army? Give or take?
No shit.
How are we getting through this?
This might help.
Fine, set it up.
You're fucking kidding, right? That's white phosphorus.
Yeah, I know what it is.
You've seen what this shit does. You know we
We might
can't
not have a
use it.
choice, Lugo.
There's always a choice.
No. There's really not.
That's right. Up until this point, you've been killing American soldiers, which in itself is pretty disturbed and far from the objectives Walker was given. But this is something else entirely, using this chemical weapon, something that causes immense pain and suffering on fellow army soldiers, and without a second thought. Adams isn't opposed, knowing it's the only choice they have, but Lugo points out there's always a choice. But in this context, there isn't, as we already discussed. You can't fight your way through this normally. It's impossible. You, like Walker, are forced to use the white phosphorus on the soldiers, in a scene eerily reminiscent of similar sequences from Call of Duty, although this time it carries a much heavier weight. Not only can we hear their anguished screams as you delete what are just mere blips on a screen, but also you can see Walker's reflection in the targeting system, showing how he and ourselves are directly responsible for the destruction taking place. And after every single blip on the camera has been extinguished and the screams of death cease, you are met with eerie silence, and only the droning of the camera and a sinister click as it glides across the destruction can be heard. Seeing that nothing is moving, they proceed down to the gate and witness what they caused firsthand. We already saw the effects white phosphorus has on its targets, but seeing it done by our own hands to American soldiers no less is hard to watch. That's what makes Spec Ops: The Line unique. After the aerial bombing mission where you have to target simple blips on a screen like a video game, you are forced to see the havoc, death, and destruction you cause so easily. Those small icons, blips on a screen, were real human lives. You see soldiers struggling to stay alive, coughing up blood, burning to death, missing limbs, gasping for air, begging for help. There's nothing you can do to save them. All you can do is put them out of their misery. But it's not until you reach the end of the camp that you realize the true horror of Spec Ops: The Line, and one of the most powerful and disturbing scenes of the entire game. You come across another soldier, his face burned to black, barely breathing.
Why?
You brought this on yourself.
We were helping.
What? Oh no.
Are those civilians?
Where'd they come from? There's no camp here.
They took him from the nest.
That hotel back at the Stormwall? No, those can't be the civvies that got kidnapped. It's not possible.
Yeah, it is. That's why Gould stormed this place. He didn't want the gate. He was trying to rescue his people.
This is your fault, goddammit! Stop right there, Lugo. What it is, he wouldn't really have a choice. He turned us into fucking killers. That's enough, Sergeant. No!
We need to keep moving.
What?
Reinforcements will be here any second. We need to keep moving.
But Walker, you're not even...
I'm gonna make these bastards pay for what they've done. Now, are you with me or not?
Unknowingly, we, as Walker, bombed and killed dozens of civilians within the camp. Civilians who the 33rd claimed they were helping. These were the people being taken from the nest. They weren't rounding up civilians to kill them, they were trying to help them, get them water, shelter. This is one of the definitive moments, the most controversial scene of the whole game. Innocent people with their skin burned to the bone, a painful and slow death, and it's all our fault. In the middle of it all, Walker sees a mother consoling and hiding the eyes of her child as they are incinerated by the white phosphorus. Corpses can be seen desperately clawing at the fence, trying to escape their fate, but to no avail. Walker is clearly just as devastated as we are. Lugo blames him as well, but Adams tries to come to his defense, but all Walker can do in the face of the destruction he caused is to keep moving. No longer, though, are we the good guys. First you shot at the people you were trying to save, then you were forced to kill American soldiers, and now you've killed dozens of innocent civilians in one of the worst ways imaginable. But to keep moving forward and escape responsibility, Walker and us as the player push on, saying they will make them pay for what they did, even though we are the ones who did it, and maybe we did it way too easily. Like, tell me, if you played this game on your first playthrough, did you even try to fight the 33rd without using the mortar, or did you just use it? It's okay if you did, I myself did too. Obviously not too many people suspect that civilians will be in the camp, but not only that, this type of mortar bombardment is pretty standard when it comes to military action shooters. Think Call of Duty and Battlefield. This kind of thing is pretty normal. The characters joke while piloting the AC-130 and bombing people on the ground. After all, it's like a video game. You don't get to see the destruction, but not in Spec Ops: The Line. To further reinforce this theme as we exit the camp, we're met with more 33rd, who call us what we are, murderers. So we do what we do best, chew through all of the infantry and push our way to the gate. But at this point, what are we even fighting for? At this point in the game, you'll also notice Walker's demeanor start to shift. Gone are the generic military callouts like tango down, target neutralized, that kind of thing. All the professionalism of being a Delta operator has gone out the window.
Kill is fucking confirmed! Round in hell, motherfucker!
Also, if you die during this segment, you're met with this loading screen. As you can see, the people burning from the white phosphorus attack. We can also see Walker clearly distraught with what he did, as a godlike figure from the graffiti we saw earlier in the game, cloaked in the American flag, hovers above.
It's over, Walker. They're dead. Good. Start looking around.
After clearing the gate, we can find a few maps, supplies, and even a monitoring TV screen which shows again the devastation we caused. But Walker doesn't want to believe that this was just a simple outpost. He reaches the top of the stairs and they find more American soldiers, tied up and executed, burned alive by phosphorus. On the ground, Walker finds their dog tags and recognizes them as Konrad's command team. Suddenly though, on a radio, Walker hears Konrad's voice. He tells them that the men led a mutiny against him, but in order to maintain order, he had to make an example out of them, which is why he had them killed in such a brutal way. Walker tries to reason with the colonel and asks what's going on here, but doesn't get much out of him. But it's clear to Walker here that Konrad is still the one in charge of the 33rd, not the radio man as they initially suspected. In the back of the same room, there can be found a board with the names of many American soldiers who likely died during this failed operation. But also there's a flag which is another piece of intel. Mostly it explains what we already know, that Konrad killed his command team to make an example of those who would betray him. Walker's belief of the honorable man who saved him in Afghanistan no longer exists. All there is the ruthless leader of the damned 33rd, who rules over Dubai.
Survival, Captain. Plain and simple. Everything is teetering on the edge of everything. But this you already know. The rest you'll have to see for yourself. Welcome to Dubai, gentlemen.
Once outside, we are then greeted with another hard choice as snipers surround us. Konrad gives us an ultimatum. Either kill the civilian on the right, who stole water, which is punishable by death, or the soldier on the left, who was sent to apprehend the other man, but ended up killing his entire family. He explains to Walker that these are the types of decisions that he has to make as a leader to maintain order and justice, and demands his judgment. So on this run, I went with the man on the left. He's a soldier, but he killed the man's family for seemingly no reason. Konrad tells us it's not the decision he'd have made, but he respects his ability to make these kinds of choices. So the snipers shoot down the thief and he's free to go, as the snipers leave us be for now. If you choose to kill the water thief, Konrad applauds your decision, choosing loyalty over lawlessness, chosen like a true commander. Adams rightfully questions Walker either way on what he's doing at this point. Everything has gone wrong during the operation, but Walker shuts him down, telling him not to speak another word about it, saying he did what was necessary and kept them alive. But there is actually another, more hidden third choice. And I love that the game chooses to include these more organic decisions in the game, similar to the one with McPherson, where it's not a button prompt or anything. You yourself as a player have to make the call and try to see if it can be even done yourself. And you might have guessed it by now, but you can actually choose to attack the snipers, but doing so is pretty difficult, especially on suicide mission or above. Like, I tried it in the first attempt and got absolutely destroyed, but if you manage to pull it off, the two men end up dying in the process, being killed by the snipers. But at least this way you show Konrad you aren't just willing to play his games, and you're not just following orders like a good soldier. You can even try to free the prisoners before fighting the snipers by shooting the ropes, but doing so makes Konrad command the snipers to instantly kill the captives, so there's really no way to get out of this cleanly. Pushing past this though, we walk into another 33rd ambush, no matter what choice you pick, as revenge for what they did at the gate, although Walker tries to claim once again that they had no choice and it was self-defense. Again, we see more signs pointing to water and aid stations. Who really are the bad guys here? During this onslaught, another storm hits, but they push through and manage to take refuge inside a large pipe. Walker tells the colonel the war is over and that Dubai will be evacuated, and Konrad will be relieved of his command. After waiting out the storm, night has seemingly fallen on Dubai. Coming outside though, Walker notices the tallest building, overlooking the entire city. He knows Konrad will be stationed there, as it gives him direct sight into everything happening in Dubai. Adams again questions Walker and what their mission is at this point, to which he responds that they have a duty now to save the people of Dubai and to evacuate the city at any cost. In one of these relief tents, where a previously failed evacuation attempt was once held, we find another tape from Radio Man called No Relief Aid. It's here we get some additional context on the 33rd's involvement in the evacuation of Dubai, as it's suggested from this tape that Radio Man might have been the one who got the message out to Konrad about what was happening and convinced him to volunteer the 33rd to aid in the evacuation efforts, as the foreign aid workers were seemingly being killed all over Dubai by the city officials trying to cover up what was going on. It seems, at least at first, Radio Man was only trying to do the right thing and get these people the help they needed, only he may have unknowingly helped aid in their deaths even further. Moving on, we hear a firefight up ahead and find the last of the CIA agents from Grey Fox, Riggs, being attacked by the 33rd. Lugo notes that this is the location given up by Gould, and that this is our fault. Still, we push back the soldiers and help out Riggs, who tells us his plan, which is to take over the water depot, the one mentioned earlier by Agent Castavin. He knows that if they control the water, they can cripple the 33rd and control the city. But during this battle plan, we're again ambushed by the 33rd, and we gotta fight our way through like always. On a table nearby, there is another intel, the psychoanalytic profile of John Konrad, which indicates a lot more about his character, mostly that he is likely suffering from PTSD as a result of his service in Afghanistan, which could have, along with the fact that he is praised as a great leader and war hero, led to him developing egomania, and that he chooses to blame others and things he believes to be outside of his control for his own failures. But gotta put down the papers because we're still in the middle of a gunfight. We push our way out of the mall, and Lugo and Adams criticize the CIA for their part in instigating the rebels, to which Riggs points out that they were already going to rise up and they just gave them the tools to do it. After this small talk, we fight through more of the 33rd and make it to the Aquatic Coliseum, which houses the majority of the city's water supply. Riggs' plan is to use his men, the locals, as decoys, fighting the soldiers head on, while he and Delta Force sneak in through the back and steal the water trucks, although Lugo points out that they are essentially sacrificing the locals in order to get this done, but Riggs assures them that these people know what sacrifice is and what it means if they can manage to take back the water. But the plan almost immediately fails as Riggs fails to open a simple door. Bruh.
Door's locked.
Alerting the entire 33rd Army of our presence, so a giant gunfight ensues and we're for the first time introduced to the armored units, and these guys can definitely be a pain. I mean, these dudes eat bullets. Still, we manage and Riggs finally gets the door open, and after beating a guy with his revolver, we drop down into the parking garage, but the 33rd were waiting for us, and this section is kinda brutal. There's a ton of enemies and even a heavy and a turret, but we get the job done and finally enter the Coliseum. Adam still doesn't trust Riggs, and neither does Walker, but he rightly points out he's basically the only one in the city that isn't trying to kill them at this point, so at least that's something. But Konrad again talks on the radio and questions Walker's decision, saying that without water, everyone in this city will die, and that Riggs and the CIA's goal isn't to help the survivors, but to bury the truth. But we can't trust Konrad either. I mean, he's tried to kill us multiple times by now, and even burned his own command team alive. Once we get in, we stealthily deal with a few guards, but eventually, as always, our cover is blown and we have to go with the fast and loose approach. Eventually, we deal with them all after a long and hard-fought battle and get to the trucks where Riggs is waiting.
I'll be damned. You're still alive. You want to stay that way? I recommend this. Step lively, people. We're about to bring this city to its knees. See you want to see him.
You want me to shoot him, or would you rather do it yourself?
You get out of this alive, he's all yours.
There will be a price for this, Walker. I hope you're prepared to pay it.
In another one-man army type sequence, we control Walker riding on the side of one of the water trucks wielding a grenade launcher, killing the 33rd trying to stop them from stealing the water. As they shoot at us, holes start to form on the containers, leaking some of the water, but we push on only to be met with an impossibly large group of the 33rd, and trapped with nowhere else to go, Riggs decides to crash the water trucks rather than have them fall back into the hands of the 33rd. Konrad taunts us again for failing the people and the city of Dubai, even telling us directly that this is our fault.
In 4 days, this city will begin dying of thirst. Just like Riggs wanted. This is your fault, Walker. You did this, not me.
Waking up amongst the destruction, Walker is now gravely injured. Half his face is severely burned, and he holds his side as he stumbles through the wreckage. Radio Man describes over the city speakers how Walker and Riggs destroyed the city's water supply and effectively doomed everyone. The citizens berate us as we walk through the area, rightly so, as some try to scramble and save what little water they can from the crashed trucks. We can hear a hushed voice nearby. Following it, we find Riggs trapped underneath one of the containers. Walker tries to get him out, but it's no use. Although Riggs is relieved that the water is finally gone. But why? Isn't he helping the survivors, trying to get the water to them? No, it's just as Konrad warned us. The mission of the CIA and Grey Fox was to bury what happened in Dubai, claiming that if the world found out about what went down, what the 33rd did, then the whole region would declare war on the United States and we would lose, rationalizing his decision to doom the people of Dubai for the greater good. He stretches his arm out for his revolver but is just out of reach. Walker grabs the pistol and we are left with another decision, as Riggs pleads with us to mercy kill him instead of letting him burn to death. He knows what he did was evil, but he believes it to have been the right call. He knows he deserves to die for his actions, only it's up to you if he deserves to suffer. I chose here to simply shoot him, not wanting to see any more suffering than we already have. However, you can just choose to walk away, which leads to a very brutal end to Riggs, an end maybe more fitting to someone who extinguished the very lifeblood of the people trapped in a desert. But whatever your decision, we push forward. Lugo manages to get in contact with Walker, who tells him that Riggs is dead, but without the water supply, staying in Dubai is a death sentence, and they have to start an evacuation immediately to save as many people as they can. However, the signal is broken as Radio Man hijacks the transmission. Walker has to fight his way into the mall to rescue Lugo and Adams, only equipped with Riggs' revolver. But once he gets there, he finds that Lugo has been captured, although we're able to quietly take out one of the snipers, steal his rifle, and kill the guy holding Lugo, leading to an all-out gunfight. The whole time, Radio Man continuously taunts Walker and Delta Force. Lugo responds, telling him he works for a war criminal, which for the first time angers the Radio Man, saying they have no idea the sacrifices and choices that man had to make, to which Adams replies that he had a choice. There's always a choice. But the Radio Man brings up the incident at the gate. Was there a choice then? Enraged by this, Lugo tells him that if he gets his hands on him, he's a dead man. And you may also notice at this point that when you kill wounded enemies, you no longer perform quick and clean executions, but deliberately cruel and brutal ones. Any semblance of anger Walker held back is now gone. The man is a full-blown animal at this point. Adams and Lugo, though, end up getting surrounded and pinned down, and Walker has to flank the 33rd from his position, only to be met with a very strange encounter with a heavy, where the lights continually flicker on and off, and the heavy seemingly teleports around, replacing the various mannequins in the shop as he does. If it wasn't already clear by Walker's current temperament and his physically scarred appearance, the man is losing what little sanity remains. The damaged appearance reflects his mental state as well. But once you kill the heavy, all returns to normal, and Walker brushes off the occasion to go save his men. The Radio Man continues to taunt Walker and the others for their failures, trying to save everyone only to end up dooming them all. At least though, this gives Walker an idea, to find where the Radio Man is broadcasting from and use his system to order an evacuation of the city and save as many people as they can. What happens next is your classic defend your allies with the turret section as they try to get to you, before our squad ends up finding and capturing a soldier, who reluctantly tells them the Radio Man is broadcasting from the Trans Emirates building, but that he is heavily guarded. The soldier tells them that all the colonel wanted was to keep people alive, but not wanting to waste any more time, Walker and his team move forward toward the building from the rooftops. We sneak down and find a nest of snipers. Adams silently deals with one of them, but the next room has a few, and with no silenced option, I'm forced to go loud here, which of course alerts a whole bunch of 33rd as Radio Man continues playing music over the loudspeakers. Pushing our way outside though, we quickscope a couple more snipers on the neighboring building before ziplining into it, while Konrad tells Walker that he'll never get all these people outside the Stormwall in time, but we have to try. And as we're going down, Walker sneaks up on an unsuspecting lookout.
Walker! What are you doing?
Adams,
You can't do this, man! Stop! Just fucking stop! Damn it, Walker! No!
Jesus. What the fuck did you do, Walker?
You caught me off guard.
Clearly, we aren't right in the head by this point. Near the body of this soldier, there can be found another of Radio Man's tapes, an interview with Colonel Konrad. It's clear from this message that the Colonel has won Radio Man over, because instead of secretly recording Konrad, he instead chooses to just shut off the recording, and record his message the old-fashioned way on pen and paper. This could possibly be of that confession we find near the beginning of the game, but clearly the Radio Man, after spending months in his company, has grown to truly respect the Colonel, who likewise enjoys the company of the DJ. But that caring man who sought to expose the corruption of the officials in Dubai is no longer here. Instead, we have a broken man who taunts us throughout the game of our constant failures and misdeeds, hiding his pain and sorrow with his gallows humor. But we're getting close now. The tower is in sight. Before we can zipline over though, we have to take out a few guards.
Kill confirmed.
He had a wife and kids!
You can breathe easy.
Well,
That's all of them.
please think of the children!
We got no time to waste with the Radio Man's antics and continue forward into the tower. In a bathroom on a pressed Kevlar vest, we find the Radio Man's badge and learn his real name is Robert Darden, and was actually a famous reporter for the Rolling Stone magazine, known for doing fluff pieces on celebrities before coming to Dubai. But even Walker notes in this intel entry that at one point he was trying to do some good. Finally making it to the top, we actually get to meet the Radio Man, where we learn the biggest plot twist of all all, that the Radio Man was actually Wendigoon.
In 1949, the Statue of Liberty went through its renovations, and that's when they started feeding people to it on the reg.
Jokes aside, with nowhere else to go, he helps Lugo set up the broadcast before Lugo guns him down. Rip.
So to go ahead, cover all my bases, I do not want to unalive myself. I'm a great swimmer. I do not look like a deer. Is there anything else I'm missing?
You're a questionable swimmer.
Oh no. They murdered him so hard.
Adams attacks Lugo, but he defends himself saying he did what was necessary, saying he wasn't going to let them walk out of there alive. Regardless, Walker uses this chance to tell the citizens of Dubai that he is the leader of an American evacuation force and that he is going to rescue them, but says first the 33rd will have to pay for what they've done. However, we are told one of the most important events in the history of this Dubai disaster. Konrad explains that he already tried an evacuation, and due to his arrogance, he got 1,300 men, women, and children killed. Likely an event that contributed to the downfall of the 33rd and the civil war that took place. So I guess now is a good time as any to explain what really happened. Essentially, the damned 33rd is the main faction you fight for the majority of the game, loyal to Colonel Konrad, who imposed martial law in Dubai when the Stormwall hit. However, after the failed evacuation attempt that killed all those people, Konrad's command team rebelled and split off into a group called the Exiles, those who just wanted to help the people of Dubai escape the city. The rest were killed before we even arrived in Dubai by Konrad and the Damned. However, after we're hit with these revelations, a chopper arrives carrying armored soldiers, and Adams and Walker have to fight their way to it, as it's their only means of getting off this building, while Lugo covers them with sniper fire. Once we make it to the chopper, Adams starts it up, and we cover Lugo with the minigun as he makes a run to escape with us. Once finally Lugo gets in, we're able to take off, but instead of just fleeing the area, Walker instead chooses to stay and kill as many of the 33rd as he can, telling Adams to circle around the pool, saying he wants to see what this gun can do. Walker has gone off the deep end, and he's getting more and more sadistic the more people he kills. He can't use the excuse of self-defense anymore, which he's been using since the start of the game. No, now he's calling the shots and actively choosing to kill more American soldiers than is necessary, instead saying they're doing this to send Konrad a message, and so they bring the entire tower down. But they're not out of the woods yet, as Lugo notices they've got company, more choppers on our tail.
Wait, this isn't right!
Well, it's too late now!
No, I mean, we did this already!
What do you mean?
Fuck it! Stop it! Just shake these fucking guys!
You got it!
Yeah, we're finally back to where we started the game, in that bombastic sequence in the helicopter. But it plays out essentially the same way as in the opening sequence. Eventually we collide with another chopper and brace for impact, as Walker falls out of the helicopter, only to wake up to a very strange scene.
Should have died long ago. We were ordered to abandon these people. Instead, we chose damnation.
Not all of us.
What? Who's there?
One of your victims. One was just following orders.
You gave us no choice.
There was always a choice. You just fucked it up.
We tried to save you.
Deep down, you knew we all had to die.
This wasn't my fault.
Captain.
Lugo.
Help.
There were over 5,000 people alive in Dubai the day before you arrived. How many are alive today, I wonder? How many will be alive tomorrow? I thought my duty was to protect this city from the storm. I was wrong. I have to protect it from you.
Eventually, Walker comes to his senses, what little he has left, as Adams tries to talk to us over the radio and tells us to find him by following the smoke. Among a bunch of luxury yachts buried in the sand, we stumble upon Adams fighting with a group of the 33rd. Luckily, we're behind them and manage to get a drop on him, even though we only have a deagle to our name. Walker, though, is able to single-handedly hold off the 33rd and even deal with a heavy, while Adams patches himself up. However, Lugo is still missing, and furthermore, Adams has already given up on their mission, doubting that they will be able to save anyone at this point, but Walker doesn't give up, thinking once they deal with Konrad that they'll still be able to save these people, but Adams sticks by Walker's side, as he's still a soldier following the orders of his superior. Luckily, it seems Lugo is alright as we pick up his signal, and he tells us he's pinned down and without a weapon, but not only that, his arm is also broken, meaning he isn't exactly in the position to fight back. Adams traces the signal to somewhere north of their position, so they head out for their lost comrade. On the way, we find the final of the Radio Man's tapes. His final message is a sobering one, talking about how the people here, even without food or water, or any real chance of survival, still find hope, and can even muster the strength and soul to create art in this hellhole. This inspires the Radio Man to become like Edward Murrow, a war correspondent and journalist during the Second World War, inspiring people even in the face of death to not give up against the Nazis and to keep hope. The Radio Man wanted to be like him, which is why he set up all those speakers in Dubai and began to speak to the people. How the mighty have fallen, but we're not ones to talk, not after all we've done. We keep fighting through more of the 33rd before we again are contacted by Lugo, who tells us that he's hiding out in one of the crashed yachts surrounded by soldiers. We push through their ranks, but we're still not able to get to Lugo's position in time, and he's forced to relocate and hide out in a refugee camp until Walker and Adams can secure the area and deal with the rest of the damned.
There's something on your mind. Why don't you say it already so we can get back to work?
This whole mission is fucked. We just took out a tower full of American troops.
They didn't leave us any choice.
You didn't leave us any choice. What the fuck happened to us, man?
Nothing. We're fucking soldiers.
Oh, I see. My mistake.
After this, we're met with one of the most difficult parts of the game. I honestly kind of struggled here. Low-key raged at this part because I almost beat it first try just to be killed by like the last guy. Then for some reason I just kept dying over and over. There's not a lot of cover out here, there's a ton of armored enemies, not to mention a heavy that also spawns, which are just tanky as hell, and even a knife guy that one-shot kills you if he even touches you, psychotically charging at you like a cloaker from Payday. But eventually I managed, taking shelter in this boat as another sandstorm hit Dubai. The rest of the soldiers were like fish in a barrel, scrambling for safety from the storm. Once the sand cleared though, there were only a couple of guys left to deal with. However, Lugo is in trouble, calling for help, saying they're closing in. Walker and Adams rush over as fast as they can.
Get ready.
The roof! Fuck! Shoot the roof! Everyone back now!
Come on, get your ass up.
You heard him! Back up, right now! I said back the fuck up! Hurry up, Walker!
Breathe, Lugo!
They ain't taking the hit!
God damn it, breathe!
How's he doing? Answer me, Walker!
Come on, Lugo!
Is he breathing? Move back, or I will open fire!
Damn it!
These assholes ain't stopping, Walker! They're boxing us in!
Damn it, Lugo!
You better fucking pray he makes it. Let me take him, Walker. Sir, permission to open fire. I need you to give the word.
God damn it.
Walker, give me the fucking word.
Playing through this part, it feels like you're truly boxed in, left with no other choice. Originally coming here to save these very people you accidentally killed by bombing, and now are actively choosing to murder for vengeance. A line crossed, if the line even exists anymore for Walker and Adams. You probably realize this by now, but you are the bad guys, the villains of Spec Ops: The Line. Still, you don't have to do it this way. Sure, you can't just walk past these civilians, but what you can do is shoot in the air, scaring them off, holding on to that line. It's an organic choice though, and not something you might think is even possible at first. There's no dialogue tree with clear-cut options. It's something you have to figure out for yourself, like with the snipers, or with McPherson in Chapter 4. During my first playthrough, I just did what I thought the game wanted me to do. I didn't even know there was another option. Going through the camp though, we find an effigy of Konrad, made by one of the locals. It's strange that he is being worshipped as some kind of savior, despite the atrocities committed by his men on his command, killing civilians and soldiers alike that step out of line. However, he is still the one in control of the city, the one that provides them with shelter, food, and water, so to them, he is kind of their last hope. But for Walker, he's the opposite.
If you're listening, Colonel, here's what happens now. I'm gonna kill every last one of your men, and then I'm gonna kill you. Sergeant Lugo is dead. For that, I will give no quarter. You brought this on yourself.
Walker assures Adams that Lugo's death isn't their fault, to which he tells him he knows. It's on Walker. He tells the lieutenant that Konrad deserves to die, but Adams finally rejects his captain, asking what they deserve.
I think we both know the answer to that.
Still, he's committed to killing any and all 33rd soldiers they come across, so we do just that, battling our way through waves of soldiers on our way to the tower. But next to a patrol schedule in one of the buildings, we can find a code of conduct for the 33rd, likely drawn up by Konrad, which provides pretty standard instructions on how to behave, but interestingly it describes how breaking enough of these rules can lead to public flogging, a punishment to deter others from committing similar offenses, but looting or other crimes of things such as excessive force will be dealt with by the strictest punitive measures, likely meaning capital punishment, death. Back outside, we encounter more damned 33rd holding out and trying to defend the gate. Desperate enough, they unleash Willie Pete yet again.
Don't let Delta beat that gate! Light him up, now! Willie Pete!
Sit down!
Welcome to hell, Walker. We've been waiting for you.
Walker, what are you doing? What the fuck? Walker, we need to take out that mortar!
As it turns out, Walker was just hallucinating, and the white phosphorus was actually just a standard mortar, but the PTSD is getting to Walker. Still, we managed to blow up the mortar with a well-placed shot from an RPG, and fight through the remaining soldiers guarding the gate. I struggled a bit at this point. This part is pretty hard as is, however I made it even harder for myself when I died at this checkpoint where a heavy spawns in, and I have no ammo to speak of and no bodies to loot, putting me in a pretty rough spot, almost getting soft locked in the process. I tried killing him with melee to no avail, even tried to let Adams handle him himself, but that also didn't work, and I even tried running into the building to get some ammo off another soldier, and I died quite a few times. But that's fine because it's during this part of the game that we're met with a lot of bizarre and disturbing loading screens. First of all, when you first encounter this heavy, he appears as Lugo, a similar hallucination to when you first encountered a soldier that looked like Adams.
Shit! Another fucking heavy! Take cover, goddammit!
Lugo!
You out of your fucking mind?
You left me to die!
Shit! Open fire!
Don't you get it? It's all a lie! No! You little fucking hero! I tried to save you! You can't save anyone! I tried! This is all! The only villain here is you, Walker.
They'll be on us soon.
There's only you.
However, if you end up dying like I did and get sent back to before the heavy appears, he instead just looks like a normal heavy now. But not only that, when you die, you're met with this very creepy scene before fading to white and respawning. And there is an equally cryptic and strange screen if you die in Chapter 13.
Stop! Just fucking stop!
Also, during this section we're on now, the loading screens present some really ominous messages. Things like, do you feel like a hero yet? And cognitive dissonance is an uncomfortable feeling caused by holding two conflicting ideas simultaneously. And trust me, there's more of these to come. Eventually, I somehow finally deal with this annoying heavy again with only a few bullets to my name, breached and cleared the Dubai seaside building again, and came across a damn 33rd memorial, likely of all the men that we killed along with their dog tags, as well as a board showing the targets of the 33rd, us, Delta Force, with Sergeant Lugo crossed out. Located at the center of the memorial was a note taped on the wall on an American flag, the final orders given by Colonel Konrad.
To my men, I don't need to remind you of the events which have led us here. We are each branded by our actions, for good or ill. Yes, there is darkness to come, but take heart, for the storm will soon break. There will be chaos in the coming days. As your commander, I know you will persevere. You are the damned 33rd. It's been the greatest honor of my life to serve alongside you. That is why I can trust you with this final order. No matter what, endure. Be ever vigilant. Hold the line.
Going upstairs, we're met with the final wave of resistance, one last-ditch effort to keep the captain and Adams at bay, a turret, armored units, and even another heavy, but they're no match for us. At least these guys weren't, but eventually we are surrounded by what remains of the 33rd, and with only two of us, winning this fight becomes an impossible feat. The 33rd calls for Delta's surrender, but Adams tells them to just shoot him. Seeing no other way out of this and heeding a warning from Konrad, Walker drops his gun, which infuriates Adams.
The fuck's sake! Give it up! The mission's over! We failed! Not while I'm still breathing! Fine! Then keep breathing! Run, motherfucker!
After Adams is assumingly cut down by the 33rd, we use this as a distraction to make a final break for the tower. All that's left now is a final confrontation with Konrad, the man Walker once respected as an honorable leader, who he now sees as the devil incarnate, and the one truly responsible for all of the atrocities committed in Dubai. On your way up, you're greeted by a few soldiers. Apparently, all that's left now of the damned 33rd, who surrender, saying that Dubai is yours. And when asked of the whereabouts of the colonel, the soldier responds, where he's always been, upstairs.
Well done, Walker. You've done what the storm could not. Destroyed the damned 33rd. Do you feel like a hero yet?
After getting off the elevator, we can find the last few pieces of intel in the game. The first is a letter to Konrad's son Jeremy, along with a picture of him. He apologizes for the things he's going to hear about his dad one day. A very sad thing to read, even after all he's done. And upstairs, you can find another letter from Konrad, a poem to a woman named Elizabeth, possibly his wife. But on the other side of the stairs, Konrad beckons you, saying there's something he wants to show you.
No matter how hard I tried, I never could escape the reality of what happened here. That was my downfall. There, finished. I hope you like it.
What the hell is going on?
Your eyes are opening for the first time. It hurts, doesn't it? you think?
You did this.
No, you did. Your orders killed 47 innocent people. Someone has to pay for your crimes, Walker. Who's it going to be?
John? Is that you?
You tell me.
I'm done playing games, John.
I assure you, this is no game. It seems that reports of my survival have been greatly exaggerated.
This isn't possible.
Oh, I assure you, it is.
How?
Not how. Why? You were never meant to come here.
We have our orders. Leave the city, radio command from outside the Stormwall. They send in the cavalry, we go home.
What happened here was out of my control.
Was it? None of this would have happened if you just stopped. But on you marched. And for what?
We tried to save you.
You're no savior. Your talents lie elsewhere.
This is your fault, goddammit!
Stop right there, Lugo.
He wouldn't listen!
We didn't have a choice!
He turned us into fucking killers!
This isn't my fault.
It takes a strong man to deny what's right in front of him. And if the truth is undeniable, you create your own.
What the hell happened?
I don't know, he just stopped moving.
Walker, snap out of it!
I get it. We have to choose.
The truth, Walker, is that you're here because you wanted to feel like something you're not. A hero.
Lugo!
You left me to die!
I'm here because you can't accept what you've done. It broke you.
Colonel? Colonel, please.
What's going on, Walker?
It's Konrad. He did it. All of it.
You needed someone to blame, so you cast it on me. A dead man. I know the truth is hard to hear, Walker, but it's time. You're all that's left, and we can't live this lie forever. I'm going to count to 5, then I'm pulling the trigger.
Not real. This is all in my head.
Are you sure? Maybe it's in mine. 1.
No. Everything. All this. It was your fault.
If that's what you believe, then shoot me. 2.
I didn't mean to hurt anybody.
No one ever does, Walker. 3. 4. Is this really what you want, Walker?
Konrad, United States Army. Evacuation of Dubai ended in complete failure. Death toll. Too many.
Everything becomes clear now. Konrad has been dead this whole time, and Walker blamed him for everything that's happened, all the death and destruction that he caused. Those radio calls from Konrad were just figments of his imagination. The radio didn't even have any batteries. Ever since the attack that killed those 47 innocent people, Walker was never the same. From this point in the story, he began to hallucinate. Coincidentally, this is the same time he began to pin the blame of Delta Force's own atrocities on the 33rd and Konrad. That scene where the snipers were holding 2 prisoners hostage and Konrad demanded a choice, it was all in Walker's head, and they were just 2 hanging skeletons. It all makes sense now. The big twist at the end of Spec Ops: The Line is that we truly were the villain of the game, the one responsible for destroying Dubai and condemning its people to a slow and painful death by thirst with no one who could save them. This is foreshadowed even further if you were paying attention to the various pieces of intel we looked at, which hint at the Colonel being dead by the time we already arrive in Dubai. The Final Orders one almost outright states it, but the very first piece of intel in the game, found in Chapter 1, tells us all we need to know: Konrad's confession letter. It's his admission of guilt before his suicide. Just like Walker, he came to Dubai to live up to his expectations he made for himself in Afghanistan. He wanted to be a hero again, and just like Walker, he failed to do so. More than that, he made it worse. He became a villain. And knowing there was no recourse, no way out of the situation that he contributed to, he ended himself. Which is why I think the idea that Walker comes to the same realization through a vision of Konrad in his mind is the perfect ending to the game. In the end, Walker was the villain, but at least he recognized that. However, this isn't the only ending of the game. There are 3 other main endings in fact, although they all follow a similar structure. Instead of shooting yourself in that final scene, you can choose to shoot Konrad, continuing to put the blame on a dead man, denying the reality right in front of your eyes. Like Konrad even says, it takes a strong man to deny what's right in front of him. Regardless, if you choose this path, instead of the game ending right here after Walker's death, we get one final epilogue scene. Walker continues with his delusion, pushing the blame onto Konrad, and finally completes his original mission and calls for backup. Sometime later, Walker is eventually found by American soldiers who've been searching for him, although he is no longer the man they think he is, a shell of his former self, broken, wielding an AA-12 shotgun and wearing Konrad's uniform.
Commander, this is Falcon 1. I think we found him. Captain Walker.
He's armed.
It's okay. Hold your fire.
I don't understand. What's he doing? Look at his eyes. Something's not right.
Captain Walker, we are here to help. But first, I need you to lay down your weapon.
He's not complying.
He's shell-shocked. Give him a second. Just hand me your weapon, Captain. We're here to take you home.
Can he even hear you?
Quiet! Captain?
It's over. Time to go home.
You know, Captain, we drove through this whole city to find you. We saw things. You don't mind me asking, what was it like? How'd you survive all this?
Who said I did?
This is just one of the outcomes here though. In this epilogue, you can of course also choose to attack and kill the soldiers, resulting in this chilling ending.
Falcon 1, this is Command. Do you copy? We heard shots. Is everything okay? Sergeant Roberts, what is going on?
Gentlemen, welcome to Dubai.
Another possibility is that you are killed by the soldiers in this firefight, and we get one final, powerful speech from Walker.
Quiet. We're under fire. Here I
Remember back in Kabul, John? Before things got bad? We were talking. About nothing, really. I said something about going home, and you said...
Home? We can't go home. There is a line men like us have to cross. If we're lucky, we do what's necessary and then we die. No, all I really want, Captain, is peace.
And those are the endings to Spec Ops: The Line. What an insane emotional journey we just went on. You can also let Konrad kill you in the confrontation, but it results in the same ending as if you shot yourself. Although this time it's more like Konrad is shooting the player and not Walker, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself there. One thing I haven't mentioned until now is that Spec Ops is heavily inspired by a novel called The Heart of Darkness, a book written in 1899 by a man named Joseph Konrad, clearly inspiring the name of our main antagonist. However, its biggest inspiration is not the novella itself, but rather another adaptation of the book titled Apocalypse Now, a film from the 70s that you might have heard of. It's an amazing movie and I definitely recommend it, but it follows an American captain in the Vietnam War who travels upriver on a mission to kill a rogue army colonel named Kurtz, who was once a war hero and has now gone completely insane. Sound familiar? Eventually the captain begins to lose his own sanity as well, on this destructive path of dealing with the colonel. And there's even another character very similar to the DJ, who is an American journalist portrayed by Dennis Hopper. But even without these comparisons, it's clear Spec Ops: The Line isn't your typical war shooter. Hell, it's not like any of the other Spec Ops games even. It's probably why the game's studio, Jaeger, accepted a deal to make a game for this franchise. I don't even think many people had heard of the Spec Ops series before this game. It's definitely now the most popular entry, but that being said, when the game released, it absolutely bombed, at least financially, which is mostly due to how the game was marketed by 2K. I mean, looking at the trailers, it's depicted as a typical generic war shooter where you're the American hero saving people and shooting bad guys. And I mean, honestly, I'm glad the game was marketed like this, because in this way it kind of baits you in, lies to you, making you think it's something it's not, before they pull the rug out from under you, which is honestly sick, but it was at the cost of the game not generating much profit for 2K. I mean, I thought it was a generic third-person military shooter myself, and so did everyone else I knew back in the day. No one I knew bought this game when it came out in 2012, but all my friends did have Battlefield 3 and Modern Warfare 3, the latest and most popular shooters of that era. There's also the fact that 2K Games demanded a multiplayer mode, which wasn't very popular either, which was developed by Darkside Game Studios, responsible for Bioshock 2's multiplayer, which I gotta say was a guilty pleasure of mine back in the day, but those who know me know I'm a bit of a Bioshock fanboy, and sadly the multiplayer of Spec Ops is pretty much dead, so I never got to actually play and experience it, but it honestly seems pretty generic and forgettable, and one of the devs from Jaeger even bashed the inclusion of the multiplayer mode publicly, although he did later retract that statement, saying he thought they did the best with what they were given, but it's still a strange inclusion given how dark and serious the story of the game is. Still, Raycivic covered the multiplayer in his Spec Ops video, which is great by the way, and showcased everything I needed to see. The game's factions are split up into the two sections of the 33rd, the Damned and the Exiles, which is cool. And there's even different subclasses with perks and whatnot, but the gameplay is just ripped from the campaign, which as we know is pretty clunky as is. Throw in lag and bugs and, well, you have the Spec Ops: The Line multiplayer experience. Not much else to say on that. Pretty standard COD-like modes, maps, you get the idea. Although there are some hilariously broken perks, and the TTK is pretty much for whatever reason instant, making Modern Warfare 2022 look like Halo in comparison. But there's also another mode that not many people even discuss, the co-op mode. There are a series of cooperative missions similar to that of the Spec Ops missions from the Modern Warfare games. Not Spec Ops like this game, but if you played COD, you know what I mean. You play with a friend and have to complete some random objectives while fighting off bad guys. In this case, I guess you play as members of the Exiles fighting off the damned 33rd, but there's not too much to say about it. You play on multiplayer maps and other areas from the campaign and just shoot guys. I'm pretty sure there's not any story to dig into here, but it was free DLC released post-launch, so why not? But another thing I should mention is this game had quite a long and troubled development, which makes sense given the nature of what this game entails. Development dates back to 2006 when Yeager approached 2K with their idea for a new third-person military squad shooter, to which 2K countered with a proposition of it being a new installment in the Spec Ops franchise. Although they were reluctant to accept the deal, given the nature of the project they had planned. But they did end up going through with the proposal because they were given free reign to make the game that they wanted to make. And development started in 2007, but the game wasn't released until 2012 for PC, 360, and PS3. Many things changed over the course of development, and ideas were brought in from different pitches and ideas at 2K and Take-Two Interactive. Also, looking back, you can see quite a few differences in the early trailers for the game, and even some of the original designs for the characters which look way different, especially Walker, who looked younger and had longer hair. Most interestingly, I think, though, is that some of the early screenshots are taken from Adam's point of view, suggesting maybe at some point he was planned to be playable in the game, maybe as part of a co-op mode for the story. Also, another fascinating note is that the lead writer, Walt Williams, described a planned DLC centered around Adams called Long Way Home in his book titled Significant Zero. He described how it was planned as a 5-mission expansion. This showed what happened to him after Walker left him to die. He wakes up scarred to the point of being almost unrecognizable, and in a last chance to do something good, he rescues a young sergeant of the 33rd called Pauza. However, by the end of the game, he realizes Adams was one of the Delta Force operators, but Adams manages to call for evac after escaping the storms, begging Pauza to kill him. Williams even writes, quote, "This was my cry for help. I couldn't write Spec Ops anymore. My characters had to die so I could get them out of my head." Oh yeah, and since we're talking about the fates of these characters, remember Joe, the rooftop sniper seen on the main menu? Well, by now, he's dead, likely killed by us, his face being picked apart by crows as buildings burn in the background during a solemn night. And after you complete the game, Dubai becomes completely destroyed, the flag now fallen from its post, the city covered in sand, and buildings collapsed. Dubai now looks like a deserted wasteland, a once bustling metropolis reduced to what looks like a post-apocalyptic desert. Not only is the sniper another casualty of our pointless crusade, but also the city as a whole. But that was Spec Ops: The Line, right? It's an anti-war game disguised as your average third-person shooter that confronts you with the grim realities and consequences of war. But there's one more piece to the puzzle, one final twist, one last layer to the story that changes everything. Remember the helicopter scene at the very beginning of the game? The one where you are pursued by the 33rd in a sandstorm and end up crashing but somehow surviving? Well, look back at the second time you arrive at this scene, when it chronologically happens in Chapter 12.
Wait, this isn't right!
Well, it's too late now!
No, I mean, we did this already!
What do you mean?
Fuck it! It's nothing! Just shake these fucking guys!
You got it!
For some reason, Walker knows this already happened, almost like a fourth wall breaking moment. But what does this mean? Well, the theory is that Walker actually dies in this helicopter crash, and everything past this is all a hallucination, and everything prior to this is a flashback, his life seemingly flashing before his eyes, happening all during his final moments. Okay, but this is just a conspiracy theory, right? Well, not really. There's actually a ton of evidence dating back to the very first chapter. Don't believe me? Take a look at this. That's right. Throughout the game, Konrad's face can be found everywhere, from billboards to posters on skyscrapers. And it's not just that. Look at the way the fades are used in the game's cutscenes. There are two distinct kinds, fades to white and fades to black. Fades to white happen when Walker is hallucinating or deceiving himself in some way, while fades to black are objective events that actually occurred, which makes this subtextual story a lot easier to follow and understand. Like the scenes where Walker talks to Konrad, combat, or during major decisions in the game, such as with the snipers and killing rigs, which is further evidenced by graffiti on the wall reflecting your decision, which can also be seen later in the level with the statues. There are a few easier to miss scenes like this throughout the game, like when you pass this tree and it looks fine, but turn around and it's dead, kind of like how Dubai is after we're done with it. Or how about this sequence when you and your squad are rappelling down, and you can actually see Lugo hanging in the reflection, obvious foreshadowing to his demise later on. Also in chapter 13 and 14, Adams constantly tells you, but the most damning evidence are the two sequences of Walker seemingly being transported to hell. The first coincidentally happening right after the helicopter crash, and the next happening after he hallucinates the 33rd firing white phosphorus at them from a mortar. But also think about it, isn't it strange that Walker suffered more damage from the fire truck crash than from falling out of a crashing helicopter? It just doesn't really make any sense, suggesting further that it was all in his head. Not to mention the fact that somehow 3 people managed to take down an entire army battalion by themselves, fighting off hundreds of soldiers. Like, sure, it's a video game, but what if the reason is because Walker is replaying the events in his head with his own bias, making them and himself mostly seem like the badass war hero he always wanted to be. Someone we also want to be, likely, if we're engaging in this kind of interactive medium. And think back to the ending where you escape Dubai with the soldiers and what Walker actually says.
You know, Captain, we drove through this whole city to find you. We saw things. You don't mind me asking, what was it like? How'd you survive all this?
Who said I did?
Now, I'm not exactly sure how to feel about this. On one hand, it takes away a lot of the agency we have as players in our decisions, as they don't really matter at all, considering most of them didn't happen if you subscribe to this theory. Like the time where you choose which hostage to kill, or whether or not to actually kill the civilians after they hung Lugo. Or maybe more importantly, in the ending, where you either choose to shoot yourself or keep denying the truth and blame Konrad, either killing the soldiers who find you and staying in Dubai, or letting yourself be rescued and leaving the desert despite your horrific crimes. None of that matters because it didn't actually happen. However, on the other hand, this twist is so well foreshadowed, and there is so much evidence that it is almost indisputable at this point. Essentially, everything points to this being the case, but it is still open to interpretation at the end of the day, and is merely implied through subtext and is not directly stated in any way in the game. But in my opinion, there is just too much evidence to discount it. My only question is regarding a couple of plot points, like how did Walker know Konrad was dead if that confrontation in the tower never took place? And did that thing with the snipers even happen? Like, they flash back to it showing that they were only corpses, but why would snipers have their sights trained on them only to leave Delta Force alone if he obeyed their orders, which were all actually just in Walker's head? You can kind of discount all of this as being a part of Walker's hallucination though. But still, even with the fade indicators I mentioned before, it's still pretty hard to tell what exactly is real and what isn't, which I'm sure was intentional. It puts us in the same mindset and mental state of Walker during his final moments. And to add on to all of that, there is also a meta-textual narrative that goes along with this. Think back to those loading screens from the later chapters. Well, there's even more unsettling ones that don't just address the dark plot and decaying world of Spec Ops, but also address you directly, the player, breaking the fourth wall. You have messages like, "How many Americans have you killed today?" and "This is all your fault." These are dark and creepy messages for sure, but you can write them off as being said to Walker and not us. But what about this? Can you remember why you came here? Or, the US military doesn't condone the killing of unarmed combatants, but this isn't real, so why should you care? Or maybe the most unsettling, to kill for yourself is murder, to kill for your government is heroic, to kill for entertainment is harmless. Most of these by now don't seem to be addressing Walker, but us as players. The game is a deconstruction of the action shooter genre. Games we play that glorify war and violence and make us feel like heroes, as we kill indiscriminately, hordes of people gunned down for our entertainment. Some people even think that the combat is intentionally clunky and hard to control, because they didn't want the game to be fun on purpose, in order to further question why we seek entertainment and escapism in games such as these. So not only do you have a mind-bending narrative tied to a delusional main character, suffering the effects of war and PTSD while he still believes he's a hero, while simultaneously hallucinating the events of the story. You also have a twist on top of that initial one, where none of it was real after the helicopter crashed. And beyond that, you have a meta-narrative about how violence is used not only in video games, but more specifically war shooters, to make us feel like we're heroes as we kill inordinate amounts of people for our own amusement. And that, right there, is Spec Ops: The Line, the most profound and disturbing game I've ever played.
Remember back in Kabul, John? Before things got bad? We were talking. About nothing, really. I said something about going home, and you said...
Home? We can't go home. There is a line men like us have to cross. If we're lucky, we do what's necessary and then we die. No, all I really want, Captain, is peace.